Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Carrie, an intern with Seeds of Healing, Incorporated. Tonight's webinar is Just Breathe With Us, Understanding Stress and Health for Black Women with Dr. Longmire Avatal. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel. If you do not wish to be recorded, please excuse yourself. Your participation is anonymous. The only ones on video are panelists, not attendees. Attendees can still drop questions in the chat and we will share them anonymously at the end of the webinar. Let me introduce our panelists. First is Dr. Longmire Avatal. She is a diversity, inclusion, and racial equity scholar educator. She is currently an associate professor of psychology and the inaugural director of the Black Women Project, an equity initiative. Her research focuses on how psychosocial factors and systemic injustices contribute to health inequities that impact racial and sexual minorities. She explores how the adoption and coping responses for chronic minority status stressors can contribute to the development of unhealthy lifestyle behaviors and mental health outcomes. Next is Benita Spratley. She is a Black woman and a longtime survivor of HIV. She has been living with a diagnosis of HIV for over 30 years and has been an advocate working in the field for over 20. She has a passion for working with those that are newly diagnosed and their families. She believes in helping to fight the stigma, embracing her journey with HIV with a positive perspective, thriving and living a healthy lifestyle through self-care, medication adherence, and maintaining engagement with health providers. She is passionate about connecting people who are isolated while living in silence with others like them. She is one of our two SOH Time moderators. I will now hand the conversation over to Benita, who will tell you about SOH Time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be a part of this event on this afternoon. SOH Time is a platform for Black women who are living positively, where you can come and receive information about HIV, about other events involved around HIV. We talk about and network with one another, encouraging one another, talking about meditating and other topics that we have on our platform. And we will place that in the website in the chat box for any of you that are interested in becoming a part. Hey ladies, welcome to SOH Time. My name is Benita Spratley, one of the moderators and content contributors here, and we're excited to have you aboard.
Hello, Queens, and welcome to SOH Time. I'm Tamisha Isaac, also one of your moderators and content contributors. I'm honored to have you join us.
SOH Time is a platform for Black women to connect across the U.S. to provide tools for self-care and encourage consistent adherence.
SOH Time is a platform for us, created by us, to collaborate and center issues that affects Black women, the struggle causes by a diagnosis or chronic illness.
We have groups with specific topics to cater to the mission of SOH Time, but uplift, empower, and strengthen you as we power through on this journey.
Surrounding yourself with women that look like you in a safe space where you are free to be yourself while learning from each other and sharing resources that can enhance your way of life on the course of this journey.
We are here for each one of you. We welcome you and we look forward to networking, supporting one another, and learning new things as we come together on this SOH Time website.
Welcome.
And without further ado, we will hand over the conversation to Dr. Longmire Avatal.
Well, good afternoon, evening. We're in that time zone where it's kind of a bit of both. I'm excited to be here. You've all heard my bio, so you know that I am a psychologist. I'm a critical health psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist, nor am I an MD. So the things that I'm going to be presenting to you are really coming from my experience of just talking to people and getting people to tell me, sharing with me their experiences about stress and what I've learned over the course of my career doing this work, but also just being a woman of color myself and someone who is juggling multiple roles and so certainly understands what stress is about. Benita, I have asked to please just interrupt me and ask questions as I go along so that we can really have a dialogue, and I'm excited to see the questions that you might have, comments, feedback that you might have through the chat. There'll also be a point in time that if you have your cell phone and you can scan a QR code, that it's going to take you to an opportunity to be a little bit of a little interactive with me and help me come up with some definitions around what is stress and what is stressing us all out. And it's still very much anonymous. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started here. All right. So I always like to start anything off with a grounding quote, and I found this one from Audre Lorde, and it was just so powerful, and one that I absolutely live by. When she says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Right? And I think, especially when we're talking about Black women and health and self-care and stress, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's always this tendency to put everyone else's needs in front of our own. In fact, we might even feel a bit guilty, and that came out a little bit in our responses about not wanting to burden others, and also this maybe need to hide our stress. And we live in a world, in a society that has consistently told us that we should not be taking this time for ourselves, but that's absolutely not true. And I hope that's something that we all kind of take away from this time with each other today, the recognition that we have to be centering ourselves. In fact, we have to center ourselves in order to help others, so that it's not about being selfish. It is about self-preservation. So to get us into a space where we are ready to talk about stress and to talk about the importance of breath in particular in stress, I'm going to ask us to do a little bit of a breathing exercise, right? So what I want you to do is take a deep breath in and let it out. And the next time you take that deep breath in, I want you to reach your hands up and bring your hands down as you're taking that deep breath in. And on the exhale, I want you to spread your hands out like this, like you're pushing your breath out. So I want you to go. All right, everyone do it. I can't see you, but I can see Benita, so I know she's got to do it with me. So come on, take a deep breath in, put your hands up. And then exhale out. Sit. You're taking in that good energy. You're taking in that new breath. And you're exhaling that other energy, that stress, all those things that are out there. You're going to clear your mind for the moment. You can do that a couple times. If you'd like to, we're going to do one more little breathing exercise. This is a quick one. But I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. And just when you think you can't take a deeper breath, I want you to just take a little bit more and then exhale it out. So I'm going to go. All right, everybody do it. I don't know about you, but I'm already starting to feel a little bit more relaxed, a little bit looser. Sometimes we're not even recognizing the stress and the tension, I would say, that we're holding in our bodies. But when we remind ourselves to breathe just in a little bit, it can really do wonders. And that's what we're going to get at today. We're going to learn and really commit to breathing more, especially as Black women in the US. So this is me. I'm all about being vulnerable. If I'm going to come onto your screen, you need to know a little bit about me. My hope is that I'm going to build trust here. So we know that I'm a professor. These are two pictures of me. Aside from the hair, you might see that I look a little bit different. There's probably about 30, 35 pounds difference between the two pictures. The picture for me that is on my left was taken in about like 2019, 2018. I think about 2019 or so. We were on a trip and it was hot and I was just not feeling good in my body. More so the fact that I just felt like I couldn't keep up. My kids were running around and I was just tired and out of breath. Everything about my body really was just hurting in that moment. And I realized that I was not doing a lot to compensate for the fact that my body just didn't feel like it could move. And I would say that was probably at one of the more stressful times in my life. The other picture that is on my right is fairly recently, because you can tell by the hair, but I turned in a promotion packet from my universities. We have to go up for promotion every couple of years. And in celebration, I hiked with my boys up a waterfall. So a very different person, different experience. And yes, certainly weight was a factor there. But it's the level of stress and the ways in which I manage stress that I've been on this journey for some time now that really is the difference, one of the big differences between these pictures. So just to let you know a little bit about me, aside from seeing these pictures of me, I'm a daughter, absolutely. I'm a friend. I'm very much a wife. I'm a sister. I'm a scholar. I'm very much a mother. But also the big factor here as to why you're seeing the difference between these pictures is because in this time, I was diagnosed with a chronic health condition. I kind of got a name to that chronic health condition. It really changed my perspective on how I go about things, how I engage the world, and also my recognition of how stress played such a huge role in my life, maybe more so than others, because it really amplified the effects and the progression of the chronic health condition, which is I have a systemic inflammation disorder that I navigate with. And I pull out the fact that I live with a chronic health condition as a Black woman in the US, because I think that's really, really important, that we don't spend enough time thinking about specifically Black women's health, centering that, and what does it mean to live life with a chronic condition when you are in the package of a Black woman in the US. So what do we know about Black women's health in the US? Well, it's a tale of health inequities. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but we know we're about 7% of the population. 7% identifies as Black women, although in general, women are making up 51% of the total US population. So we are very much a minority, not only in potential kind of power and privilege and positionality, but very much in just on a numerical level, we're a minority. And for years, continuing, even though we make such huge gains, even though we are dedicated to education and we are very much a part of the labor force more so than other groups, we still make about $5,500 less than other women. And we're more likely to experience unemployment. And you don't even want to know the numbers when you're comparing that to men. As of 2014, we know that Black women are 43% more likely to die of breast cancer than white women. That's partly because we tend to get diagnosed later with a much more aggressive form of breast cancer, a form of breast cancer that's tied to inflammation. And it's important that I keep bringing up the word inflammation. So keep that in mind. 49% of Black women over the age of 20 have some form of heart disease. So that could be anything from clogged arteries, stroke, chest pain, high blood pressure. And about 82% of Black women have been characterized or identified as either overweight and obese. And I know those are shaky numbers because when you're using something like body mass index or your BMI, somebody like a Serena Williams will have a high BMI, but she's clearly not an obese woman. But there is something to the extent that we have a very high prevalence of overweight or obese numbers that we need to be thinking about. And then even from my own particular research, we found that 1 out of 2 Black collegiate women met the criteria for major depressive disorder in comparison to 1 out of 5 for white collegiate women. So you have this overview of health in general. When we look at HIV, we still see that Black women are disproportionately impacted by new HIV diagnoses. So 57% in comparison to 21% or 18%. So when I take this information as a critical health psychologist, I say, what do I do with it? I'm not in the biomedical components. I'm not a clinical psychologist or anything like that. But I do think that there are some patterns that lead me back to this curious case of stress. And I call this a minoritized psychoneuroimmunology loop, and we'll get into that terminology. But basically, we know if we're looking at the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop, our health and well-being is at the center of that Tootsie Roll Pop. But we know what's covering one of those big layers that we have to get through, that permeate, that we have to find our way, kind of fight through, that to get to that center of health and well-being is social inequities. And we know those social inequities have a lot to do with chronic gendered racial discrimination and bias, as well as systemic and institutionalized gendered racism. And I don't say just racism, I don't just say sexism. For Black women, it's the combination of both. It's the intersection of both. What we already know from research is that social inequities, those systemic inequities that we have to face on the daily, create what I refer to as systemic stress. So it's not just your daily stress of, oh, I got to the line and the thing that I wanted, all of a sudden they were sold out, or I had to experience a traffic jam, or my kids were doing this and that when I asked them to do this over here. This systemic stress is deeper, much, much deeper, right? It's woven into the experience of what it is to be a Black woman in the US. And it creates what scientists refer to as allostatic load, which is essentially the wear and tear on our organs, right? That stress causes our body to go out of whack, to be out of balance, because stress has a physiological response. And that fight to get our system back into balance puts pressure, puts energy and trauma on our own bodies. And it creates what we call this allostatic load, which essentially wears us down. There's some really kind of interesting and scary research that suggests that if you look at Black women and compare them to white women and you make everything equal, right? So they're same levels of education, same levels of economic earnings, married with children, hold not married, no kids, hold everything equal. You will still see on a cellular level that Black women, no matter the fact that they're the same actual chronological age as white women, are about 7 years older on a molecular level, right? Because we age faster. So everybody's heard that terminology, Black don't crack, right? And I've been looking at Angela Bassett for years now, trying to figure out why that woman is just not physically aging and trying to figure out what her secret is, right? And we all live in this space of like, I don't have to worry. Look, I don't have wrinkles. I'm looking good. Nobody knows our actual age, but internally we are aging rapidly, right? And so this is what we refer to as weathering, right? So what do we do about this, right? If we know this is the case, what happens? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to how we've been socialized to cope with the stress that comes from systemic oppression, right? So how we cope with it, how we socialize, how we engage it. And this is what I hope we get to talk about a little bit more today. So I want to pause here, and I want you, if you have a phone and you can scan the QR code, you're going to go to a screen called Padlet, and you'll see a little plus sign once you get there, and you can click on that plus sign and you can answer this question, right? Tell me, what is stress to you? Either tell me what is stressful or how you're defining the word stress. If a child came up to you today and said, what is stress? What would you tell them, right? You might be telling them the things specifically that stress you out, or you might give them a much more general answer, right? So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to go to our Padlet screen. You can't see that. That gives you an answer over there. So let me stop that. And I'm going to share the Padlet. Is everybody good with getting to Padlet? I see little people moving, so we're on here. Right? Too many tasks, and you can like things. You see the little heart. If something hits you and you're like, yes, you can tap on that like you would tap on a like on Facebook, and we'll see if somebody else is feeling the same way. Right? Stress is a situation that causes you to worry. Right? So it's too many things, too many tasks. It's something that is causing worry for you. What else? What other things? Right? A sense of feeling overwhelmed. Every time I ask somebody to define what stress is, overwhelmed is the word that always comes up, right? Being called on by everyone, right? Loving this. Losing control. All right. I'm liking it. So losing control, being called on by everyone, work, sense of feeling overwhelmed. Stress is a situation that causes you to worry. Too many tasks. This notion that we are just spread incredibly thin. I see another little person, another little alien there in the top working. So I'm not going to close out yet. All right. Missing important things by mistake. Yeah, because you're juggling so much. And the interesting thing is we know that stress plays a role on our memory. You can tell yourself 5 times, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then you still forget because you are just overwhelmed. You're tired, right? Stress is a process and it makes us tired. All right, let me go back to my presentation here and we'll keep going. Right? So if a scientist had to tell you what stress was, then they would tell you, right, that stress is how the brain and body respond to any demand, any type of challenge, whether it's having to do many things, whether that's walking down the street and seeing the escaped lion from the zoo, right? All these things cause stress. The other day, I go on walks, and a tree had toppled over, and the tree toppling over was not the problem. That was not stressful for me. What was stressful was that there was a long snake skin that apparently had been in the tree, and I realized that where I am walking, there are a lot of snakes. Now, I know I'm in North Carolina, and I should get over my fear of snakes, but I cannot. And so I had a stressful moment in that moment because I kept wondering, well, where's the snake that shed the skin? Right? It's not just the skin, it's that it belonged to a snake. So where was it? But that was a stressful moment. That's in that fight or flight moment of stress that we talk about, right? But stress is how the brain and body respond to any demand, any type of challenge, such as performance at work or school, a significant life change, or a traumatic event can be stressful. So stress can be positive, it could be negative, it could be something that comes on in the moment, it could be something that happens over time. Right? And in fact, there are many different types of stress, positive forms of stress, stress that involve big life-changing moments, something like a graduation, a new job, something you're really excited about, right? These are great things, but it causes a form of stress. And it's not a bad form of stress. It's what we call eustress, right? But it could also be in the form of something like a natural disaster. And we have these so often now. We used to have these storms of a century, actually one a century, and now storms of a century happen like a couple of times a year. And there are major outcomes to that. And that can be very stressful. It can also be chronic, right? This goes back to our the systemic system stress, right? We think about where we were last summer when we were most of us were out there protesting in the middle of a pandemic, dealing with the endemic that is racism, right? Because racism is an endemic, something that is not going away. It's been happening since basically the creation of the US, right? And then if you think about the roles that we play, whether it's friend, daughter, mother, sibling, whatever that may be, right? Those relationships can be positively stressful at some times, but they can also come with another form of stress as well. In fact, when I asked other Black mothers to tell me what was stressing them out, they talked a lot about this idea of just what you said, trying to manage the household, that they're navigating racial discrimination, that they're constantly having to prove their skills and intelligence far more in their professional field than anybody else, right? They get questioned where somebody else doesn't get questions as much. And they're clearly worried for their children, right? They were mothers, so that was on the forefront. When they even think about their children and they think about the stress that they have specifically for their kids, they think about what does it mean to navigate this world as a Black person? What about the opportunities, the financial, the educational, even just the romantic? Are you going to find that person that you care about? All these things they're worrying about were a function of their stress. The interesting thing is when I gave them just a general, just how stressed do you feel scale, they kind of all answered pretty middle of the road, but they had like a CVS long list of stressors that they were actually identifying. And I think as Black women, we've just kind of gotten to a point where our baseline for stress is so high that we don't recognize probably more stressed out than most people. And that's really important when we think about that relationship to our health. When SOH Time was just starting up and we were in the middle of the pandemic, we asked women who have been living with HIV to talk about what was stressing them out in a pandemic. And these were some of the things that people responded with, women responded with. I worry about my family and loved ones, that they're going through things both mentally and physically. I'm stressed because I'm high risk and I like to go out, but I would not go out right now. And I'm going to wait to go out a little bit longer. So this isolation, the unknown of what our new normal of everyday living will be like, the daily updates about ways that the virus can spread. 1, losing my ability to work and meet my financial obligations. 2, how to manage my overall health and prevent obtaining COVID. 3, weight gain from limited activity. And 4, adapting again to our new normal with the pandemic. A lot of these things ring true to me, even though I'm not a member specifically of this community. So what do we know about stress? We know that it's not necessarily the environmental event nor our response to the stress, but rather it's our perception of the situation that determines whether or not something is stressful. All right, so here we get into a little bio. Have you ever really thought about what stress is, right? Well, there's a physiological response to stress. And this is really critical in understanding why breath is so important, because we have our nervous system, which is our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is everything else kind of spanning out from our spinal cord. And that peripheral nervous system is broken down into two areas, right? Two systems in and of itself. And there are more breakdowns, but we've got limited time here. And that is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. All right. So the sympathetic nervous system is a specific part of our nervous system that really plays a key role of amping us up. Right? If you know Public Enemy, then you know Flavor Flav, right? I'm not really sure Flavor Flav has any, I mean, maybe he has immense talent, but his talent seems to be the fact that he is very much the hype person, right? If you don't know Flavor Flav, then you know, if you look through your recent calls, you probably have that one friend, although if I look through mine, I think almost all of my good friends are this person, but they're the person that hypes you up. Being like, you're gonna let them do that? You gonna let them do that? Nah, you gotta come back at them for that, right? That person that's like, yo, do it, whatever it is, you know, takes it up a notch, right? That sympathetic nervous system is basically that person, right? So that when you are faced with something that you perceive as stressful, your sympathetic nervous system immediately kicks in. And it kicks in by mobilizing your body for action, getting you ready to either tackle whatever the stress is or get out of dodge as quickly as possible. So if I see a snake, I'm quickly summarizing, you know, can I jump over it? Or do I just need to run quickly away? I'm probably going to run quickly away. But either way, that's my sympathetic nervous system fully in action. You know, your child comes home and says, guess what? XYZ is due like tomorrow. So you're just like, okay, what store is still open? We got to get this. We got to get this. That like, okay, I'm in the zone. We're going to get this done. That is your sympathetic nervous system. And in that moment, you might think you're super strong, right? You can't even feel pain. Can't even feel the wind. You're in it, right? But you've got increased heart rate. You've got increased breathing, you're starting to sweat more, and you actually are decreasing your gastrointestinal activity. So, you know, the minute you recognize that you're going into a stressful situation, you might have an urge to go to the bathroom. But once you're in that stressful situation, even if you had to go to the bathroom before, you're not thinking about it. You're just thinking about the task at hand. Right? If I see a snake, I'm not gonna be like, oh, well, let me pause and go to the bathroom. No, I'm gonna keep going. So my gastrointestinal activity starts to decline. Part of that gastrointestinal activity is our metabolism, right? Which we don't think about, but our metabolism actually slows down when we're in the throes of stress because the body can't be bothered burning off other energy. It's gotta keep what it's got, right? So it doesn't take much to activate that sympathetic nervous system. It's like your light switch. It flicks on really, really quickly. The parasympathetic nervous system is there to turn you off, right? That's the system that brings you back under control. That's the system that promotes relaxation. It's active during your just kind of general normal chill situations and moments. It's supposed to decrease your heart rate, decrease your breathing, decrease the sweating, and it's supposed to rev your metabolism and your other gastrointestinal activity back up. The interesting thing that we have learned about this stress response is that this works great when you're seeing like a lion in the street or a bear or a snake, or you've got to, you know, you've got to deal with something real quick in that moment. The chronic stress that comes with everyday lives that we live, our sympathetic nervous system gets flipped on and then it stays on because the stress doesn't go away. And it gets harder and harder to turn it back off. The parasympathetic system almost gets overrun. And it doesn't have the same energy and oomph to be able to pull that switch off from on. And that's where breathing really comes into play. So what do I mean by this chronic stress and this relationship to health, right? So we know that prolonged experiences with stress affect our mental and our physical health. It contributes to our allostatic load, so that wear and tear, that internal aging that our system is going through. But we see increases in high blood pressure, autoimmune disorders, insulin resistance, obesity, particularly in form of metabolic changes. So we're not burning enough calories anymore, but we also tend to emotionally eat, because when we're stressed, nobody says, give me that carrot, because, you know, I've had a stressful day. Right? I'm waiting for the day that I say, oh, I have had such a stressful day. I would love some celery. It's not going to happen. I will take some ice cream or some cookies, I own my emotional eating, right? We start seeing changes in our sleep. Some of us sleep more, some of us sleep less. We may see fatigue, especially in the form of what we call racial battle fatigue, where you're just done with everything and everyone in it as a function of that racism. And we see increases in depression and anxiety. And we see increases in inflammation, and it tends to trigger or weaken our immune system. So particularly for individuals who are dealing with immunocompromising disorder, this can be incredibly harmful to the management of their condition, because anytime you are increasing inflammation, you may be kind of triggering your immune system to kind of kick into action when it doesn't necessarily need to kick into action. And so then when it is presented with an opportunistic infection, it's too tired and sluggish to respond the way that it needs to respond. It's really interesting, specifically the chronic stress of racism for women who are living with HIV. They find that women who are living with HIV who experience chronic forms of racism and discrimination, if they are not kind of aware of the societal oppression, if they're not using that language and are aware of how systemic stress and systemic oppression works, they are much more likely to have lower CD4 counts if they're not aware of it, and they're more likely to have detectable viral loads. So in terms of long-term adherence for Black women, recognizing the stress that comes from racial discrimination, really kind of calling it out for what it is, seems to be really critical, that we have to think about that identity and the positions that we hold. We also know that chronic stress, when we see weight gain, it tends to be in kind of the abdomen area, so your stomach area, right, is where you might gain that weight, stomach and chest, and that can put you at risk for things like heart disease, so hypertension, stroke, clogged arteries, and that also is the area that it's harder to lose. And we see that relationship for women who are not diagnosed with HIV, as well as women who are diagnosed with HIV. So now that I've depressed us all, what do? Right? We remember about the importance of breathing and getting that exhale. I can't be somebody has to see my waiting to exhale. I've been saying shoop, 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 shoop all day. That was like 90s. I think I was early teens when I saw that movie. It was like one of the first movies I went to with my mom, because she was like, Black women, you gotta go see this. Self-care is so incredibly important. And part of that self-care is centering breathing. Right? I always think about when you're on a plane and the flight attendant says, if we start losing cabin pressure and the oxygen masks come out, even though you might want to put that oxygen mask on your child or that person next to you that might be incapacitated, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then help them. Because if you put it on them, you may not have enough oxygen left to help yourself. And that goes back to that self-preservation. And I think for Black women, we really have to give ourselves permission to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first and to breathe deeply, inhale deeply, before we then start helping others inhale and breathe deeply as well. Right? So for me, the importance of breathing and getting that exhales, we have to push back against this notion of being that strong Black woman where we carry everything on our shoulders, where we don't ask for help, where we put others before ourselves, that we really are switching and saying, no, we are going to be that person that's paying it, that's following the directions, and we're going to put on our own oxygen mask first. Now, what that oxygen mask looks like might be different for different people. We know that being this kind of strong woman who's juggling everything, it's not really sustainable. And in fact, what happens is we tend to lose sight of our ability to engage in self-compassion, right? And that is that even though we might have all the compassion for others, we don't treat our own selves and our own beliefs with the same compassion that we give to everyone, right? So when we're in a moment of stress, it's okay to acknowledge that and to pause and say, what do I need right now to help me through this? And to own that, to be in that space, that is okay, right? And then, of course, we've got to engage in self-care. And some of that self-care is just making time for us to breathe. The interesting thing about breathing deeply is it actually tricks the brain into activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that very switch that we are trying to pull down, that our body is just not able to do it on its own, maybe it's confused, it doesn't know if we're out of that stressful moment. When we breathe, we are activating our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's not just your regular breath, but that deep, intentional breathing, just taking a few minutes to do that, it activates that parasympathetic nervous system, and it prolongs our ability to navigate and to respond to that stress in a way that's not detrimental. Right, so I'm sure you all have various different ways in which you self-care. And if you have a self-care method you want to share, please go ahead and put that in the chat. But here are some things. When there was a beautiful article in Essence, and they asked 6 Black psychotherapists, what do we do about self-care, especially in the age of COVID? And so they said, combat isolation with connection, right? Recognize that Black people, we are an interpersonal and collective people. So when we come together, we recharge. Yes, it's important to have your own space, but also you can reach out and connect with others. And that is hard still as we navigate those pandemic, but this is exactly the point behind SOH Time, and why we all on this call believe in it so much. Rest and recharge. Right? Sometimes you got to just take a moment. Everything seems out of control. Instead of fighting for that control, sometimes you got to say, you know what? I just got to take I got to take a moment. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's longer, and just rest and recharge. You find out that you're actually more productive when you've had that rest. Try meditation. Try mindfulness meditation. There are some free programs like Liberate. Liberate is an app specifically for people of color that you can download onto your Android or to your iPhone. And you can find all different podcasts and opportunities there to go through some mindful meditation by and for people of color. And you have to find a place to process your strong emotions in a way that's safe for you. So no more of this absorbing our emotions, right? That just keeps our sympathetic nervous system going. To really activate that parasympathetic nervous system, we've got to let it out. We've got to express those strong emotions. So sometimes we just might need to have a good cry. And sometimes you can find that person that is able to let you have that cry with you. And I would say for Black women in particular, what seems to always come up is the importance of faith and spirituality. Now, people have different forms of faith and spirituality, but engaging your faith, engaging your spirituality, especially for Black women, has become a consistent form of stress reliever that we should lean into. All right, so I'll leave you with this. How do we breathe? How do we break the stress health cycle? We've got to remember to breathe, whether that's doing formalized classes like yoga or mindfulness meditation through the Liberate app or whatever, or just sitting and doing small breathing activities. You got to remember to breathe. I want you to remember to evaluate your options, including your potential support. Are you really in this alone? Do you have to juggle all these things? What's the one thing you really need to do? And can the rest of it kind of be put on the side, or maybe kind of do it in triage fashion? What do I have to do now? What can I do a little bit later? What can I wait on and do? Maybe it doesn't all have to be done in this moment. Right? And that goes into this notion that you got to develop effective time management and boundary setting skills, especially for Black women. We got to be able to say no. Nothing else. Don't give up. I'll see. Well, maybe. Give me a second. Let me see what I can do. No. No, thank you. Nah, I'm good. Pass. Hard pass. Nope. All of those words work, but those are really important because when we're not doing things, it gives us more opportunity to breathe in and breathe in intentionally and deeply. I want you to think about unplugging and understanding that no one, including you, is perfect or superhuman. Right. So constantly when we're absorbing all this information, especially on social media, and we're seeing so-and-so did this and so-and-so did this, and this person hiked Mount Everest while also writing a book and launching a fashion line. And you're like, I'm just here trying to make sure my kids get to school on time, and so then you feel like, well, I got to do this and I got to do this. Nope. Go away from that. Understand that you are not perfect, and that person that you're seeing, they're projecting a very curated image, right? Most likely it is not them, and if you snuck up on them, went to their house unannounced, you'd see a whole different person, right? So remember that, right? Concentrate on finding those practical solutions, and I want you to think about how you're energizing through healthy behavior. So maybe you like to cook. Cooking can be fantastic, but don't cook maybe the comfort foods that are adding to the emotional eating cycle. Perhaps taking those things that maybe are comforting and reproducing them in such a way that it's healthier. Going for a walk, maybe going for a walk with someone, right? Saying it's okay to say no so that you can say yes to something else. It's all about reducing that load, reducing that activation of that sympathetic nervous system by enacting breath. So I leave you with this. This is from Maya Angelou, and I thought this was beautiful. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. So I hope that I have brought at least a few of those things here tonight. Anita, let's have a conversation in time that we have left. Do you have any questions? Does anybody else have questions? What are we thinking? Oh, the chat kind of blew up. I
was about to say, like, they have been absolutely having fun, and the chat box has been lit the entire time.
Yay!
Your presentation. And
I'm not technologically savvy enough to see the chat and
yes, I've been just reading all of the different comments and stuff. And I think one person talked about fight or flight. We have to learn how to choose our battles and to know the things that trigger us. And so you don't wait, until the moment is absolutely heated. And then, you're scrambling, trying to figure out, what's going on, and so with me, that's pretty much how I tend to do. Like at this particular point at my age, I already know. I'll just use my daughters, for instance. God bless their hearts. I know when they say something or they're about to say something that I know is gonna, get me going as a mom. And I have to just leave. I have to cut the conversation off, and I'm, baby, not today. We're not doing this because, I know I'm gonna flip out and, that's gonna send me to a whole spiral. And then the rest of my day is kind of, in a funk. And so you have to really know those triggers and things that are gonna set you off or send you in a direction or spiral you out of control and stuff. So that was one thing that I picked up. I really enjoyed the outlook that you gave us and all of the different slides and resources and different things to use. It was very helpful and very informative.
I am so excited. If anybody has any questions, Benita, I think the idea of, avoiding our triggers is so important. We tend to especially I think as Black women, we just think we have to walk through the deep end, like we just got to wade through that water. And life is about patterns and orders, surprises, but you'd be also surprised at how many patterns there are. And so if you recognize how, you're seeing the signs, that's the time where I'm all about what I call the pivot, right? Where you're on something and then you see like, that's about to go left. So I'm about to go right. And just do that pivot. Sometimes that person that they get that octave goes up a little bit and you just like,
we're not doing this
today. I'm gonna back off. And that is not selfish. That is self-preservation. And that allows you to be in that space with them at another time. So, and to be in a space when you are not activated yourself, so that the conversation and dialogue is more meaningful.
Yes, I'm protecting my peace, at all costs. I have to maintain a self of peace in order to go about my day and protect my mental state. Yes.
And it doesn't mean that we don't get angry. I don't like the fact that, a lot of times for Black women, our anger is surveillance, is under surveillance. We can't be the angry Black woman. We can't be here. And that's why I say, you got to find a safe space, because I understand that the stakes are higher for us in terms of how we express our emotions and when. But to avoid expressing your emotions, perhaps in one space that is not safe, doesn't mean that you stop expressing them altogether, because that contributes to that ongoing stress, that stress response physiologically happening in your body. Those tears, that shout, that whatever, it goes a long way. I do kickboxing 3 days a week. And it's not like I'm in a rink or whatever, but I go to 9 round and I'm able to punch it out and all these things. Sometimes I just have to visualize a person on one of the balls and just hit away, and it's a good day.
Absolutely. Sometimes running away is not saving you, it's actually saving the other person, because you may end up doing something or saying something that later on you're going to have to come back and apologize and make amends. And those are just some of those things that I try to avoid from having to do.
Exactly.
Very good. This is great.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to tonight's webinar. I feel like there was a fantastic discussion. Thank you, Dr. Avatal, for your time and dedication. Again, that was just fantastic, and I think it had a lot of useful information for everybody. For those that are eligible, we encourage you to sign up for SOH Time. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram for future updates and webinars. Again, this will be posted to our YouTube channel, so you can view it there at a later date. Thank you, everybody, again for coming, and have a great evening.